Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to I believe it's our fifth month of our Beginning Farmer Rancher webinar series. This is a joint effort between the Farm Service Agency, which I'm a part of, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the Risk Management Agency, and Rural Development. My name is Liz Thomas. I'm the Outreach and Communication Specialist for the Farm Service Agency. And I'm here to just kind of help out with anything that NRCS might need. But I'm going to hand it over to them to do their own introductions and start with the presentation. Thanks for joining.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cindy Einspar. I'm the Outreach Coordinator for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and I'm so glad to have you guys here. Plus, I want to remind everybody that both Liz and myself have this. Each of the programs are loaded on our Colorado NRCS and FSA webpage, where you can review any of the past webinars, and that we will have these all in store for us for the rest of our webinar series. But I'm excited today. Today is with NRCS, and we're going to be talking about what our programs are and what we do. And we have a special guest with us today. Her name is Liz With, and she is the Assistant State Con for Partnerships. And before that, she was the Assistant State Con for Programs. So she has a lot of experience, a lot of insight, and we are lucky to have her with us today and giving us her ideas about our programs and what's going on. And also, if you have any questions, put them in the chat and I will be able to help answer some of those, and Liz can too. Because like any program, we also start with FSA when signing up with NRCS programs. So without anything else, let's get started. And with Liz, thanks for being with us, Liz.
Mute, key thing. Good morning, folks. I'm Liz with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. I'm super excited to be here. Cindy gave you a little bit of my background, but also just wanted to share that I've been with the agency for over 20 years, located luckily outside of the state office here in the Gunnison Service Center. And as you'll see my contact information here later in the slide, please, 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 if you're struggling to figure out what best fits for your programs, reach out to Liz Thomas, reach out to Cindy, reach out to myself, and we'd be more than happy to direct you and help get you where you needed to be. Okay, so just a quick introduction. I know that this is a whole series and you guys have been talking about it, but NRCS is one of those branches in the USDA family tree. You've met a lot of our rural development and FSA friends. This by far is not the full agency tree. It's just a couple representative branches. So we're one of the lesser known branches here to serve you. And we've been working on cultivating conservation since 1935 in the Dust Bowl era. A gentleman by the name of Hugh Hammond Bennett saw some of the massive resource degradation happening specifically kind of in those, the Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado type area. Took it to Congress, and due to national security and the importance of our own resource conservation, the Soil Conservation Service was started. In the Clinton era, we we were transitioned to the Natural Resources Conservation Service because we deal with so much more than just soil conservation. But we continue to work with from then through till now and into the foreseeable future. We pride ourselves in being able to partner with our private land owners to protect these precious natural resources. And so who we are is locally led conservation. We work with our community stakeholders, the grassroots folks that are out there working on the agricultural properties, on the forest lands, to implement conservation on those mostly private land resources, though occasionally we do touch some of our public resources. We're not a land management agency. We work with you guys for your conservation projects to address your resource concerns as you see them across your operation. So we have two different ways that we can help you. We have technical assistance, and we'll go into both of these here a little bit more in the future, but just big picture idea. Technical assistance is what we can provide, kind of the facts, the technically sound resource conservation principles, research-based, trusted, tried, best management practices to address your resource concerns on your operation. Nothing comes template, right? We're doing this with you as your conservation project on your property. And then to enable you to implement those conservation projects, we do also provide opportunities for financial assistance to help you kind of cost share those projects, because we understand that conservation can be expensive, and it's totally worth, Congress has determined that it is totally worth those conservation efforts and partnering with our local ag producers, forest landowners to implement those projects for the nation's food resources, conservation resources, and national security even. So talking about just technical experience and what we can bring to the table. We provide technical assistance through a program called CTA at no cost to landowners. We have a staff of amazing specialists, engineers, engineering technicians, soil conservationists, agronomists, foresters, wildlife biologists, and so much more that work with you on your private land resources, go out there and help you with resource inventories, looking at what your conservation project goals and outcomes could be, and helping you develop a conservation plan. Okay, and that can contain things as detailed as nutrient management plans, or even engineering designs for maybe for anything, right? Pivot systems, water diversion structures, things that you need to increase the conservation on your property. Okay, so specifically what NRCS does is once we've done a resource inventory on your property to help you understand where things are, you know, what looks great, what things can be improved of, you work with NRCS to determine what type of conservation practices you're interested in implementing. Okay, they are all technically scientific proven conservation strategies that you choose to implement. If it's not something that you want to address, or it's not something that you really prioritize in your operation, that's fine. It's your voluntary conservation efforts that lead you to these conservation plans, right, for the sustainability of your ag operation. NRCS has over 170 conservation practices to choose from that can be implemented across all different types of ag operations, from forestry to livestock to cropland systems, just depending on what you're working on, irrigated versus non-irrigated. And often those practices are applied in a system type approach, right? So if you were grazing on rangeland and you need some water development, typically you potentially also need some fencing and grazing management strategies so you can better move those animals around and increase your sustainability of your grazing operation. Each conservation practice has a whole bunch of information associated with it. It goes back to that scientifically proven type strategy, right? And so NRCS has worked really hard to use sound science to develop standards and specifications for how those practices can be implemented. And they're all found online at the Electronic Field Office Technical Guide. And you can use that information, but if you go into an NRCS office, we'll help you tailor it specifically to your operation, what that looks like specifically for you. You can do it on your own. You absolutely can if you just want to look up and see and get some of that information. We also have a really strong conservation work video series. And this is a series of ag producers just like yourself talking through conservation practices, some of the things they've seen, why they chose to implement it, some of the things that they really appreciate. And even in some of these videos, some of the things, lessons learned that they wish they would have done differently or can be improved upon when you implement it on your operation. So I'd strongly encourage you guys to head to that farmers.gov website and check out some of those videos. And then what I'd really like you guys to think about is, do you have a conservation plan for your agricultural operation or forestry operation? A conservation plan is a 5 to 10 year plan for the conservation work that you envision on your property, right? And it's your record of decision. It is totally voluntary. You can implement it, you cannot implement it, but it helps you understand what resources you have, what things could be addressed, and helps you prioritize addressing those resources on your own time schedule, right? And once you have that conservation plan, that's when you can dive into the financial assistance realm that NRCS can offer, right? Where we can offer funding to help you implement that plan. And so when I talk about financial assistance, I'm talking mostly about Farm Bill. Recently, we do have funding from the Inflation Reduction Act that we're also putting out there using Farm Bill type programs. And we're going to dive a little bit more into those programs, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a scope and a magnitude to what we're talking about when we say financial assistance. So between 2010 and 2023, here's just a summary of the Farm Bill conservation projects in Colorado alone. We have worked on over 11 million acres across the state with just under 11,000 different ag producers. Okay, for a total of $624 million in projects. A lot of those are still open, right? We've made payments on just under 5 million of those, but you can see here in the lower right-hand side, kind of that obligation, the dollar values of Farm Bill projects that go out on a yearly basis. And you'll see on that upper part of the right-hand side is a list of alphabet soup of our different programs. We're going to get into those and talk those through a little bit more, but just wanting to detail that today we're going to focus on the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. Those are the top two lines on that bar graph. And as you can see, they get the lion's share of the funding for the state of Colorado. And I meant to say this earlier. I really prefer engagement. If you guys have questions, feel free to just pop them in the chat, or there's a raise your hand feature in Teams. And I strongly encourage you, if you've got questions, just go ahead, pop them in the chat, raise your hand. You can ask them. You don't have to turn your camera. And we'll just make sure that if you've got questions, we'll get them answered right away. Okay. So jumping in and talking really what our financial assistance programs can offer to you through Farm Bill and Inflation Reduction Act funding. We're going to look at EQIP, we're going to look at Conservation Stewardship Program, and we're going to dabble a little bit in the ASAP program. And these are just 3 of our programs. There's a whole bunch of other funding opportunities. Most of those take a little bit more work and coordination with partnerships and that type of thing, and they're absolutely available to you. I'd strongly encourage, if you want more information on any of those other programs, go ahead and reach out to me and we can talk it through how it can work for your operation or for your conservation district or your conservation partners. So let's look at EQIP and CSP a little bit more. Those are programs that folks kind of already know for the most part. But we're going to start at ground level. So the Environmental Quality Incentives Program is a program for conservation practices where we make payments at an agreed to rate to address a resource concern that's been identified by NRCS that you want to treat. Like I said before, it's all a voluntary program, right? We're not telling you what to do. You're choosing what type of conservation efforts you want to implement. Typically in EQIP, what we do is we help you with the structural things. Okay, so like paying for the fence line, right? Paying for a portion of the fence line or a pivot system or things like that. The Conservation Stewardship Program is really for those folks that have addressed a lot of resource concerns on their property and are looking to go beyond just basic stewardship into a higher level of conservation, providing a larger suite of ecosystem goods and services. For those folks who are really passionate about conservation and environmental stewardship, and typically those payments, and we'll look at them here on the next slide, are more based towards management type practices. So not so much like a structural thing, but more so like prescribed grazing or wildlife habitat management, stuff like that, that is more than just equipping you with the tools. It's also equipping you with the strategies to implement those conservation projects to a higher level. Okay, so these payment rates, I just wanted to give you guys kind of a general expectation of things that get paid for in each of the programs. These payment lists are hundreds of pages long. There's a link at the bottom of this slide, and we'll put this slide in the text here. Cindy, if you wouldn't mind also posting it to the website so folks have active links, that'd be fabulous. But it gives you kind of a good idea on what the programs pay for. So starting out, I'm going to start backwards on the slide and look at EQIP projects, right? So EQIP pays for conservation practices. It pays for things like herbaceous weed control and fencing and obstruction removal. And again, these are just some of the many things that they can pay for. And you can see the payment rates for fiscal year 24 posted there on the slide. In CSP, it's actually a large portion of the payment comes from land-based enrollment in the program, right? So if you've got let's say roughly 100 acres of range where you're treating a whole bunch of resource concerns, 5 resource concerns, you get paid per acre per resource concern. And then part of that is you figuring out where you want to go above and beyond. If you want to implement additional conservation practices, which don't pay as highly in CSP, because CSP is really for going above and beyond, and those EQIP practices are typically just to meet the threshold. So it's not incentivized as high in CSP as it is for EQIP. But CSP does allow for enhancement payments, right? So that's implementing it to that base conservation practice level and then building on a little higher to do a little bit more even above and beyond what that base conservation practice would offer in conservation benefits, okay? And the CSP program is a 5-year program in which you receive annual payments. An EQIP contract can be anywhere from 1 year to 10 years in length, and you get paid as soon as you get something done. NRCS can do the certification and issue the payment just as soon as work is complete. So there are slightly different programs, but both have their usability for different reasons. Okay, so hopefully now you're a little bit interested in potentially participating in conservation planning, getting some technical assistance, and seeing how we can help you financially implement those conservation projects. And I'm going to pause right here because I see a question from Demetra, and Demetra asks, can you use both EQIP and CSP at the same time? And you absolutely can. You'll need to work with your field office because they can't have any sort of duplicative payment. You can't receive a payment for prescribed grazing in both EQIP and CSP on the same acres at the same time. But you can enroll both acres in each one of the programs and implement different conservation strategies that are beneficial to both programs at the same time. So that was a great question. Thanks for asking that. And Rachel asks, when the fiscal year 2025 payment schedules will be posted. We're currently working on developing the fiscal year 2025 payment schedules. I do not anticipate them being posted probably until January-ish, but it changes every single year. So typically when we try to announce a sign up, we try to make sure that those new payment rates are also posted. It doesn't always happen, but that's the goal. And using previous year payment schedules usually is a pretty good indicator of what the following payment schedules will look like. I know we've seen a ton of inflation over the last couple of years, and we've been adjusting things up. It's a good idea. It's probably a really strong indicator of at least a minimum payment for that practice when thinking for future years. Okay, so if you're interested in participating, again, like I said before, we've got a ton of conservation programs, and I'd encourage you first and foremost to reach out to your local field office. We have offices in almost every county, and 100% of the state is covered by NRCS and FSA staff. And so once you've reached out to those NRCS folks, they'll be able to help you and help marry your conservation project with the appropriate conservation funding and help inform you what you should be applying for financially. Okay, Debbie asks, if you own land that is in a permanent conservation easement, will that land qualify to participate in the CSP or EQIP program? So Debbie, potentially, there are some things like if your land is in an agricultural conservation easement for the Wetland Reserve Program, like a WRP easement, it's potentially not eligible, but that conservation work that you want to do may be eligible for funding under the WRP conservation easement, even if the restoration has already been complete. I would encourage you to talk with your local field office. If it's an NRCS held conservation easement, there may be some other limitations, but if it's a land trust conservation easement, there's some pretty good potentials in still being able to participate in our conservation programs. So it depends on your easement, I guess, is the long answer. Okay, so I want to be able to help you guys get in the door and get things you need to be able to implement your conservation projects. And so here's the 5 steps to getting through that assistance and getting to implementing your conservation project. That first step that we already talked about is making contact with your NRCS office and starting your conservation plan. Again, it's your voluntary conservation plan that fits your ag operation. The projects that you want to take on because you see there's a need. We'll help inform you technically about everything that's out there, but it's really what it comes down to is what do you want to do and how do you prioritize it? Okay, so that's the planning bit. That's kind of our technical assistance bit. right? And even if you don't want to seek financial assistance, having that technical plan, NRCS can still provide you with implementation strategies to those conservation projects. We can still provide you with engineering designs, even if you're not going to seek funding to actually implement those engineering type projects or conservation type projects. We're more than willing to just provide technical support. But if you do decide that you want to seek financial assistance to help implement those projects, NRCS will work with you to get a conservation application, okay? That's kind of right after you get a conservation plan, that's kind of the next step. And at that point in time, your NRCS local office will help work with you to figure out which financial assistance program best fits your need and your conservation goals. And they can help you inform, maybe you should be applying straight away for CSP because of all the great things you're doing. Or maybe you need some help with some of the structural practices, and maybe EQIP's a better fit, and they'll help you walk through that decision-making process. Okay, just like anything USDA does, there are certain eligibility requirements to qualify for financial assistance. Anybody qualifies for technical assistance. For financial assistance, you'll need to make sure that you've set up some records with the Farm Service Agency, and they'll have a couple of questions for you. There are adjusted gross income limitations. They can potentially be waived, but setting up those records, making sure you're in wetlands and highly erodible land compliance and all of that stuff to get you qualified are key. Okay, so once your eligibility has been determined and you've submitted that application for your conservation plan, all of a sudden NRCS will start ranking your application. Okay, and it will be ranked in the first available ranking period that's open after your eligibility has been established for your conservation, and it's your conservation project. And your project is compared to other like projects, either locally within kind of your watershed area or even in statewide fund pools. Irrigation projects compete with irrigation projects, forestry projects compete with forestry projects. Like projects compete for that funding, and those folks that are willing to do more conservation are often the ones that get prioritized funding. It's one of the reasons. Build a really good relationship with your local NRCS, and they can kind of help you understand what's needed to make it through into kind of that top tier of conservation funding, right? Those projects that are getting chosen and selected for funding. And then once the ranking process happens, applications are selected for funding. And once an application is selected for funding, a full contract's developed. It provides for a payment rate for each conservation project and a schedule of installation. So when you guys are working through implementing each individual conservation project within your conservation plan, and what the NRCS reimbursement rate is going to look like once you've installed that practice. So again, just trying to make sure that you understand the process starts with reaching out to your field office and getting that conservation plan developed, talking about your resource concern, getting somebody out on your land to help look through your resources with you and talking about your operations goals. I did just want to take a quick minute to talk about our conservation, our easement conservation programs. We have some amazing easement conservation opportunities. If you are interested in permanently conserving your land, severing the development rights for your property and keeping it either as a permanent wetland or as an ag operation in perpetuity, start with talking to your local field office and working with the local land trust to find out what that could mean for your property. It's a great opportunity, but building a strong relationship with your local your local field office and your local land trust that you want to use is pivotal to kind of getting that project started. They'll even help you with filling out the application information and establishing the eligibility stuff. So So you'll want to start there. And that is kind of more of a long-term strategy. Typically, once an application is accepted for funding, it still even takes NRCS and that land trust working together a year up to 2 years to get that funding paid out. So I did just want to give you guys a brief overview of all the great conservation easements in the state of Colorado. We do have, this is slightly older information. I don't have the fiscal year 2024 information for us yet this year because we're still working on that, but over 350 closed easements on nearly 300,000 acres. Okay, Colorado is one of the leading states for developing conservation easements and working with our land trusts partners. So if you've been through the successional planning process and you've decided that permanent conservation easement is right for you, for your family, for your ag operation, let's talk about what that can look like. And then I really wanted to put a plug out there to ask you guys for help. NRCS is a grassroots agency. We're always looking for feedback from local ag producers who know the resources, who see the resource concerns, who have those local partnerships, right? We need you guys as beginning farmer or ranchers to get involved with your conservation district boards. We need you to get involved with local working groups and the state technical advisory committee. If all of this is alphabet soup to you, I'd strongly encourage you again, go talk to your local field office, talk to your local resource team lead, and tell them that you want to provide feedback. Tell them that you want to be part of making the decisions on funding priorities, on land use priorities, helping Colorado understand what ag producers need, what beginning farmer or ranchers need. That's key to all of this, right? We're always trying to listen to what our ag producers need. It's never a top-down approach in NRCS. We're always trying to do it based on partner needs, partner goals, and strategies, because you guys are the ones that are seeing it on a daily basis. And so, again, thanks for having me here today. I saved quite a bit of time to kind of reserved for questions or to tailor it to what you guys wanted to know about. So I'd welcome any questions in the chat or if folks want to raise their hand. Otherwise, Cindy and Liz, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, you were speedy today, Liz.
Never speedy.
I'm sure they have some questions. Maybe people, does anybody have any other questions for Liz before we adjourn for the day? And usually we like to tell you if there's any deadlines coming up. Liz, do you guys got any deadlines with FSA that we need to tell them about? Or because NRCS, we don't have any deadlines right now. Our application is year round and we are currently always taking applications and we don't have any known deadlines that I know of. Do we, Liz?
No, but I'd strongly encourage you guys, if you are interested in conservation funding, working with your local field office right now will set you up in a really, really good place to potentially take advantage of funding opportunities as they start to pop up in 2025. In fiscal year 2025, probably late calendar year 2024.
What about Liz Thomas? Do you have any updates and programs that people need to be signing up for right now?
Yep, we sure do. So one of our deadlines just passed July 15th for acreage reporting. That's also the same with RMA. So if you have any crops you need to report for spring planted crops and you haven't, make sure to contact your local FSA office. We did also just announce the emergency relief program for commodity and specialty crop producers impacted by 2022 natural disasters. If you're wanting to apply for it's the Emergency Relief ERP 2022 program, the deadline is August 14th, 2024. And I do have a news release that I will put the announcement in the chat if anyone wants it. And then recently, Colorado has also been affected by H5N1 in dairy producers. So FSA does have a program to help with any offset for milk losses for any of your cattle or dairy cattle that may have been affected by that. And producers have to report within, I believe it's 120 days of noticing that it came about, but you have until January 30th, 2025 to put in a notice of loss for that. So I'll drop both of those notifications in the chat. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to let us know. Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you so much. Anything else that we need to go over before we leave today? And of course, we will have a another call next month, which will be over how to use web soil survey and go over some soil health principles. So I hope that you all join us again. And again, we will have our webinar posted on our sites with both FSA and NRCS. And thank you very much for joining us.